Hiding in Plain Sight, Part 1. We'll be reading from John 13:21 to 30 today in Bible Study Hub. Welcome on in. I'm Ann Wiggins and always glad to be with you. I will be reading from the Legacy Standard Bible so you can follow along on your own or you can just listen in. And here we go, John 13:21 to 30. And it says this: When Jesus had said these things, he became troubled in spirit and bore witness and said, "Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me." The disciples began looking at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. There was reclining on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. So Simon Peter gestured to him to inquire, "Who is the one of whom he is speaking?" He, leaning back thus on Jesus' bosom, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "He is the one for whom I shall dip the piece of bread and give it to him." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he took and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And after the piece of bread, Satan then entered into him. Therefore Jesus said to him, "What you do, do quickly." Now no one of those reclining at the table knew for what purpose he had said this to him. For some were thinking, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus was saying to him, "Buy the things we have need of for the feast," or else that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he went out immediately, and it was night. Let's just review here for a moment because this is, if you're following along live with us, Monday, April 28th, 2025, and this is our devotional for this Monday. We've been in the Last Supper situation here for a few days last week. So we are in the upper room with Jesus. He has just concluded washing everyone's feet as an act of service, even Judas's, which is kind of amazing. Now they're eating their meal together. Judas is still with them. And it's at this point Jesus gets kind of emotional in his spirit. He knows what's coming. This is not just a regular betrayal. This is the betrayal by one of his closest friends that he loved, that he had spent time with. And because of this betrayal, Judas will forever doom himself to an eternity in hell. So bad it will be for Judas that Jesus says of him in Matthew 26:24, he says, "It would have been good for that man," speaking of Judas, "if he had not been born." So Jesus tells everyone that one of them, one of the 12, will betray him. Maybe you've wondered in the past how all of this could have happened. I mean, Jesus here clearly points Judas out, and yet nobody seems to know that he is the one, that he is the betrayer. Well, you have to kind of picture the scene as it would have occurred at this time to really get a clear focus of what's going on. It's not like the Da Vinci painting of the Last Supper where they're all at a high table and they're standing around on one side of it. This is completely different. That's not how they ate at that time. The way that they would do it is they would have a very low table and they would actually recline at the table. They didn't sit on chairs like we do. So they would recline on their left side and then they would eat with their right hand. They didn't have utensils, forks, spoons, those types of things, but rather they would have kind of like discs of flat bread, and they would chunk off a piece of bread and then they'd use the bread to dip into the stew, and then the bread kind of became a vehicle for the stew, and they would eat the bread along with the stew. And that's what's going on here. So you have to picture the scene. They're lying on their left side, they're eating with their right hand, their feet are kind of away from the next person next to them, kind of on the diagonal. So there are 13 men, the 12 plus Jesus, in probably a pretty small room. It's loud, it's boisterous, they've got stone walls most likely, and there's people to absorb the sound, but there's no carpet, no draperies, no sound panels, nothing like that. So you've got a pretty live situation in this room with 12 guys plus Jesus. Everybody's talking, there's laughing, there's, whatever that's going on, like normal conversation. And you've been in a restaurant before where it's hard to hear because everybody there is eating and talking and having a great time, but there's just so many people in a small space. It makes it difficult to really know exactly what is going on around you. This is where we are with this whole thing. Now, John refers to, he quotes, the disciple whom Jesus loved. This is a reference from John, the writer of this gospel, about himself. It was common in ancient times to refer to yourself in the third person when writing narratives like this. It was just considered more polite, a little bit more humble, not to make it all about you. I did this or I did that. So they would write about themselves in the third person. And that's what John is doing here. So John was likely on Jesus's right side, which might be why Peter kind of like mouthed to him. You can always picture it like, you ask him, somewhere else around the table. And so John would have probably leaned in and kind of quietly asked his question so that the others may not have even heard it. And when Jesus hands Judas the bread dipped in the stew, or some versions call it the sop, John very well may not have even been able to really see what was going on here. Again, because you're kind of sideways. Does that make sense? And the other disciples apparently saw that, but they hadn't heard what John had asked Jesus. And so you just have a lot of disconnect going on, which in the providence of God was how he wanted it to be. And we know this because even Judas doesn't really seem to know what Jesus had just said. It appears as though he thinks Jesus is just giving him more food, like handing him, here, have another, like we would do, right? Like, here, let me give you another helping. Jesus would have taken the bread, dipped it in the stew, maybe handed it to him, and he was like, okay, I'll have seconds. That's fine with me. And then Jesus tells him to hurry up, basically. Go do what you're going to do. What does Judas think about this? We really don't know because nothing is said. Does he really think that Jesus knows what he's going to do? Maybe there was a previous conversation and Judas had already thought of a way to kind of explain why he wasn't going to be there all night and he thought he had pulled one over on Jesus. We're not really sure. But Matthew 26 does fill in quite a few more details if you want to read that on your own. We won't take the time to do it now, but Matthew 26 is a parallel account of this story. So by the time that John wrote this story, Matthew's gospel, as well as Mark's and Luke's, had already been written. So John chooses to tell stories that the others didn't include. And what they had already included, he doesn't repeat all that often. So he's filling us in on a few things in this story that the other writers left out. One of which this very personal perspective is on that night and his secret conversation with Jesus. So we're out of time for today. However, tomorrow we're going to discuss another aspect of this event that's going to be really comforting to you. So don't miss out on that. But for today, I just want you to realize that every single aspect and detail of this story, of the whole Bible, it is true, it is trustworthy. A lot of people get hung up, and I can understand why, going, oh, there are all these different accounts of the crucifixion, and they'll say there's problems with those, and John says this, but another writer says that. What we have here is actually just four testimonies of the same event from four different perspectives. Some were eyewitnesses, some got their information from eyewitnesses and wrote it down. And just as if you were a witness to, say, a traffic accident at an intersection, as well as, say, two or three other cars that saw the same traffic accident, you would have very similar but slightly different variations of the story, not meaning that any of you were wrong. It's just one person may have noticed that the person who crashed was on their phone texting, where the others might have said they were going really, really fast through the intersection. Well, it's not a discrepancy. It's just that one person happened to see the phone and the others noticed the speed. And it's that type of situation that you have with these gospels. If they were verbatim, word for word, the same, what we would naturally say is, well, whoever made this up, the others just copied them, right? So the fact that they're not identical, but not in conflict with each other, is evidence for the veracity, the truthfulness of these accounts. You can trust the word of God. Well, I gotta go. So do you. Thank you for being with me today on Bible Study Hub. Have a wonderful day. I will see you back here tomorrow morning, Lord willing, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Our videos go live on Facebook and YouTube, Bible Study Hub. See you then.